3 years ago, I married a man I had only met twice before. We signed the papers at the register office. Before the wedding, we agreed that our marriage would only last 6 months. He helped me deal with my uncle's family, and I accompanied him to see his grandmother one last time. Afterwards, I was busy graduating, finding a job, and moving house. I completely forgot about the divorce. If I hadn't found our marriage certificate while tidying up today, I might have forgotten I was even married. Are you in a hurry to find someone else? Giles Farnaby's magnetic voice came through after a moment of silence. Not really, I replied. Then would it be all right if we wait until I finish my current project before divorcing? He asked. Will it take long? I inquired carefully. Giles paused. 3 months. Can you wait? I suppose so, I said, not wanting to sound too eager to end things. Having got the answer he wanted, Giles promptly ended the call. 3 months later, I dialed Giles's number again. Mr. Farnaby, do you have some time soon? Is this about the divorce? Yes, it is. I'm in a meeting now. I'll call you back later. He hung up before I could respond. I waited with my phone from 2 p.m. until 2 a.m., finally falling asleep from exhaustion. When I woke up, there was a missed call from Giles and a text message. Meet at the court at 9:10 a.m. I grabbed my bag and ran out without even washing my face. But I was still 7 minutes late. Giles checked his watch and said, I have a negotiation at 10. We'll have to reschedule. My cheeks flushed red with frustration as I chased after him, asking, when will that be? He glanced coolly at his assistant, Zadok. Zadok understood and checked the schedule. It'll have to be next year. This felt like blatant bullying. Why don't you call weekly to check for cancellations? Zadok suggested, seeing I was on the verge of tears. Sometimes appointments do get canceled. I suppose that's all right, I conceded, knowing I was at fault for oversleeping. We'll reschedule. Giles gave me a reassuring look before leaving. For the next few weekends, I called Giles to check his availability. The answer was always the same, no changes to the schedule. Just as I was about to give up, Giles finally relented. He said he had a golf game on Thursday, and if it finished early, we could finalize our divorce. I took the day off work and spent it waiting for Giles's call. But as night fell, instead of hearing from Giles, I ended up with a drunk on my doorstep. I was in the middle of composing a text message to call Giles Farnaby a liar when Zadok Sinclair phoned, asking me to pick up his boss. Miss Urquhart, our boss is drunk and insisting on divorcing you. I can't talk him out of it. Please come quickly and see what you can do. I glanced out the dark window. If he wanted a divorce, couldn't he have chosen an earlier time? Though confused, I still hailed a taxi and rushed over. Upon seeing me, Zadok looked as if he'd seen a savior. He strode towards me. Miss Urquhart, please help me talk some sense into him. I glanced at Giles Farnaby on the floor. His gaze was dark, his expression serious. He didn't look drunk at all. I walked over, crouched down, and tentatively asked, do you know who I am? Giles nodded, my wife. Shall we go home? I glanced at Zadok and coaxed in a low voice. No, Giles glared at Zadok and hiccuped. We agreed to divorce today. I can't break my word again. At least he still had some conscience. I lowered my gaze and noticed his cheeks were flushed, making him look just a tiny bit adorable. I shook my head, quickly snapping myself out of his charm. The court's closed. Can we do this another day? Giles paused, looked up at me with bleary eyes, and asked, which day is another day? I quickly looked to Zadok. Zadok rolled his eyes helplessly and scrolled through his phone. Sir, your schedule is booked until next April. It was only August now. Giles asked pitifully, can she wait? No, I said, almost through gritted teeth. She says she can't wait. Giles lowered his head, disappointed. Zadok sighed, Miss Urquhart, our boss always blacks out when he's drunk. Why don't you just humor him for now? I promise I'll try my best to squeeze some time in for you to divorce sooner. April it is, I grudgingly agreed. Boss, did you hear that? Miss Urquhart says she can wait, Zadok promptly reported. Giles nodded and slowly got up from the floor. Then we'll come back in August. When the car arrived, Giles politely opened the door. I'll see you home. I didn't refuse. Once in the car, I gave my address and then stared out the window, lost in thought. When we reached my building, I had barely stepped out when Giles followed. I thought he was just concerned about my safety as a woman alone at night and wanted to walk me to my door. But he followed me all the way into the lift. It wasn't until we reached my flat that I finally realized something was amiss. Mr. Farnaby, thank you for seeing me home, I reminded him patiently that it was time for him to go to his own home. Giles looked puzzled. Aren't we family now? You wish. My face flushed with annoyance. Giles once again turned his pitiful gaze towards Zadok. Zadok coughed discreetly. Miss Urquhart, our boss blacks out when he's drunk. Perhaps you could let him stay for the night. Since you might not remember anything, I suppose it's fine if I don't take you in, I said, deliberately coldening my face as I reached for my keys to open the door. Just as I inserted the key into the lock, Giles suddenly pressed his hand over mine. My heart skipped a beat. Trying to maintain my composure, I spoke, Mr. Farnaby, please let go. Giles hesitated for a moment, then slowly removed his hand. I quickly turned the key and opened the door. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief and slip inside, he suddenly grabbed my hand. What on earth does this man want today? What exactly do you want? I finally lost my patience and snapped. Giles stood there, dazed, his almond-shaped eyes fixed intently on me. Zadok hurried over to hold him back. Miss Urquhart, why don't you let him sleep in the living room? The sofa or even the floor would do. I didn't relent. I'll try to arrange some private time for him within a month, Zadok tempted. To be honest, I was a bit tempted. All right then, I finally compromised. Once inside, I made some Scotch broth for Giles. He sat obediently on the sofa, staring blankly at the television. I placed the Scotch broth on the coffee table and retreated to my room. I didn't come out again for the entire night. The next day, I walked out of my bedroom. Giles had already left. The bowl that had contained the Scotch broth was washed clean and placed on the kitchen counter. What a strange man. At that moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Outside stood a man in a suit and tie. I recognized him. 3 years ago, he had witnessed the signing of the marriage agreement between Giles and me. Was he here to handle our divorce proceedings now? It seems Mr. Sinclair was more reliable than his boss. Miss Urquhart, I have an agreement here that Mr. Farnaby asked me to pass on to you, Mr. Lockett said as he sat down and took out a document from his briefcase. I took it and glanced at it. It was a list of Giles's personal assets. I put the document down. What does this have to do with me? I remembered that we had done a property division before getting the marriage certificate. In other words, Giles's personal income before and after marriage had nothing to do with me. The property agreement Miss Urquhart initially signed with Mr. Farnaby only covered property division within 6 months after marriage, Mr. Lockett said. I understood the rest without him having to explain further. I don't want it, I said, handing the document back to Mr. Lockett. Let's stick to what we agreed on before. I hadn't fulfilled my marital duties in these 3 years. There was no reason for me to take half of his hard-earned money. Are you sure you don't want it? Mr. Lockett looked at me in surprise. I shook my head. I really don't. Mr. Lockett said teasingly, do you know how much money you're giving up? £500,000? Although Giles was a boss, the car he drove was only worth about $30,000. He was busy like a spinning top every day, probably because he couldn't bear to hire a professional manager. Miss Urquhart, you must be joking, Mr. Lockett said with a smile as he stood up. Since you don't want anything, I'll go back and draft a new agreement. Is getting a divorce really this complicated? He didn't say it would be this troublesome before. I had just seen Mr. Lockett out when Giles's phone call came through. I hurried to answer it, but it was Mr. Sinclair speaking. Miss Urquhart, our boss is in a meeting. There's something he wants me to clarify. The boss says, who are you insulting with £500,000? I was completely baffled. Was he implying I'd said too much, or too little? Regardless, I had already made my position clear to Mr. Lockett. I didn't want a penny. When Miss Sinclair didn't get a response from me, he continued, Miss Urquhart, our boss believes you lack a basic understanding of him. He hopes that during this time before the divorce, you'll do some proper research. Hold on, why didn't I understand a word he was saying? That's all, I'm just relaying the boss's instructions. I hope Miss Urquhart understands the predicament of a working man, Miss Sinclair added, then promptly hung up. I stared at my mobile for a while. My brain slowly caught up. He thought £500,000 was too little. It was an insult to his earning capacity. Though I didn't understand, I still seriously searched for Giles Farnaby's name on my phone. The search term you entered involves personal privacy and cannot be displayed. What on earth? I was shocked. Stubbornly, I tried entering my own name as a test. As a result, I could find my emo photos posted online 7 years ago, not to mention a bunch of people with the same name as me. Why was Giles Farnaby protected? Who exactly was he? As I was pondering this, a voice message came through from my best friend, Rowena Cargill. Meredith, Aubryn Hardacre is back. He's inviting everyone for dinner at the Ritz restaurant tonight. Do you want to come? Aubryn Hardacre? No, I replied. I hadn't seen him in 7 years. I'd almost forgotten he existed. Come on, please come, Rowena wheedled and pleaded. He even asked me about you specifically. Why would he ask about me? I felt inexplicably nervous. Probably still hasn't given up on you, Rowena gossiped. I frowned and cut her off irritably. Rowena. All right, I'll stop. Rowena knew she was in the wrong and asked meekly, You really won't come? No. I flatly refused and ended the call. In the evening, as I was eating dinner alone at home, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Giles Farnaby was standing outside, looking weary. I glanced out, confirming there was no sign of Miss Sinclair, and couldn't help asking, Do you need something? Aren't you going to invite me in? He asked. I opened the door wider, inviting him inside. He immediately spotted the food on the dining table. I haven't had dinner. I fetched a new bowl from the kitchen, filled it with food, and placed it opposite me. Would you like to join me? Yes, thank you. Giles Farnaby sat down comfortably, not standing on ceremony at all. I had only cooked 2 bowls of rice in total, and he wanted another after finishing his. I showed him the empty pot. There's no more. Cook more next time, he said, displeased. He really wasn't treating himself as an outsider, was he? He drank a bowl of soup, then took out a card from his wallet. This is for the meal. Take it and buy more groceries. I didn't accept it. He chuckled lightly, Don't worry, it's definitely over £500,000. Mr. Farnaby, I put down my bowl and looked at him seriously, asking, What exactly did you come here for today? Nothing really, just to clarify something. When you divorce me, you'll get far more than £500,000. How much is it? I don't know which wire got crossed, but I found myself asking quite cooperatively. I haven't calculated the exact amount yet, Giles Farnaby said proudly. I've already arranged for my personal financial advisor to sort out my financial situation for the past 3 years. As soon as I have the results, you'll be the first to know. Personal financial advisor? What on earth? That won't be necessary. I made it very clear to Mr. Lockett today that I choose to leave with nothing. If his financial advisor takes 1.5 years to calculate, will this divorce ever happen? Suddenly, Giles's expression darkened. I don't have a habit of letting my woman leave with nothing. I'm not your woman. My expression turned frosty. We clearly agreed it was a mutually beneficial arrangement with no interference. How did I become his woman? Are all rich people this presumptuous? Giles didn't speak. His ink-black eyes gazed at me silently, and the air instantly became tense. Just as I was about to succumb to his wordless stare, there was a knock at the door. I quickly got up to answer it. Standing outside was the person I least wanted to see. My face paled slightly, and I was about to close the door when Rowena Cargill looked at me pleadingly and said, He insisted on coming to see you. I really couldn't do anything about it. The rest of her words were swallowed back as she met my icy gaze. Aubryn Hardacre looked at me with a grim expression and asked, Are you so unwilling to see me? If I had to choose one person I least wanted to see, it would undoubtedly be Aubryn Hardacre. What can I do? Aubryn sniffled and chuckled softly. All these years abroad, there wasn't a day I didn't think of you. I kept my head down, saying nothing. But my fingertips trembled slightly. Darling, who is he? At that moment, a broad, warm hand gently grasped my trembling fingers. I looked up in shock to see Giles's deep eyes flashing with a distant smile. My uneasy heart inexplicably calmed down. Darling? Aubryn narrowed his eyes, those unruly orbs coldly appraising Giles. Then, turning his gaze back to me, he asked, "When did this happen?" "It's been a while," Giles smiled nonchalantly. "I believe it was on Valentine's Day 3 years ago when we registered our marriage." "Was it Valentine's Day? Why don't I have any recollection of that?" "I don't believe it," Aubryn said coldly. Rowena, standing to the side, looked at me in shock and asked, "Meredith, you're married?" "Yes, I am." I hadn't told anyone about my marriage to Giles. At the time, I was truly naive enough to believe that after 6 months, we would become two strangers with no connection. So, I didn't tell anyone. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were married," Rowena, seeing my uncomfortable expression, wisely apologized and turned to Aubryn, saying, "Aubryn, maybe you should let it go? Meredith is already married, it's not right for you to keep pursuing her." Seeing that he didn't move, Rowena gathered her courage and continued to persuade him, "This is all my fault. I didn't check properly before bringing you here. But now you know, Meredith has found such a handsome husband, we should quietly bow out." "Shut up." Rowena obediently fell silent. I rather wished she'd say something more to provoke Aubryn. Giles remained composed, secretly squeezing my sweaty palm as he smiled and asked, "Would you like to come in for a quick bite?" He asked with utmost politeness, every inch the master of the house. "Sure, don't mind if I do," Aubryn replied with a forced smile, winking at me. I nearly lost control and wanted to punch him. Fortunately, Giles tightened his grip on my hand. Aubryn swaggered into the house, eyeing the remnants of our meal on the table. He frowned slightly and asked, "This is what you call a quick bite?" Giles sat down at the dining table and pushed the card he had given me earlier towards Aubryn. "There's £5 million on this. Stop pursuing my wife. Are you mad?" Aubryn was shocked. I was even more shocked. I quickly snatched the card and rubbed it vigorously. "Are you running a fever?" He was just a small business owner, how could he casually offer £5 million? Besides, he probably didn't understand who Aubryn was. He was the young master of the Hardacre Group. Old Mr. Hardacre had married 7 times and only produced this one precious son. Back in school, Aubryn's monthly allowance was over £1 million. As expected, Aubryn gave a sinister laugh. Glancing at the bank card on the table, he said, "I'll offer £10 million for you two to divorce." I was speechless. Rowena's eyes widened in disbelief, probably never expecting the situation to take such an absurd turn. Giles chuckled coldly, maintaining his composure. £10 million to buy my wife? Who do you think you're insulting? Then how much do you want? Aubryn asked coldly. Money was the least of his concerns. £58 billion, Giles paused briefly. After saying this, he casually glanced at Rowena and me. I was utterly speechless now. Aubryn's face darkened completely. He growled through gritted teeth, even the world's richest person might not be able to produce that amount. Giles's gaze turned icy, his tone absolutely certain, "He can." Aubryn snorted, even if he could, would he spend such a fortune on a woman? Not to mention that no one had ever seen this so-called world's richest person. For all we knew, he could be some half-buried old geezer. If you're not willing, how do you know he wouldn't be? Giles's cold eyes suddenly turned as sharp as a knife, piercing Aubryn. It was the first time I had seen Aubryn display an expression close to shame in front of me. "Mr. Hardacre, take this card and leave," Giles said lightly, slipping the card into Aubryn's breast pocket before opening the door with a gesture of invitation. To my surprise, Aubryn actually left. However, before leaving, he threw the card on the ground and sneered, £5 million to make me back off? Who do you think you're insulting? After Aubryn Hardacre left, Rowena Cargill also departed with a reluctant expression. Once again, it was just the two of us in the house. Giles Farnaby took the initiative to clear the dishes, but I quickly told him to rest. Your time is billed by the second, sir. Let me handle this. All right, he didn't argue and went straight to the living room to watch television. I sighed, thinking this man must have gone mad about money. After tidying up the kitchen, I secretly sent a WhatsApp message to Zodok Sinclair, asking if his boss had any business troubles recently. He was already starting to imagine things. Zodok replied quickly, the boss's recent trouble is that he can't spend his money fast enough. Great, even his assistant had started talking nonsense. I arranged the cut fruit on a plate, preparing to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with Giles. While earning money was important, there were many other things to busy oneself with in life besides making money. For instance, finalizing our divorce. Giles frowned at my words and asked, "Are you in such a hurry to divorce because of that young lad from earlier?" "No," I replied. There was absolutely nothing between Oberon and me. "He likes you," Giles paused before continuing, "I'm not blind, I can see it clear as day." "But I don't like him," I said. "I can see that too," Giles looked at me and smiled. This was the first time he had smiled in front of me, and it was strangely attractive. I couldn't help but curse him silently as a tempter, forcing myself to look away. After eating a few pieces of fruit, I hinted that it was getting late. He should go back to make money. Giles checked his watch and nodded, tomorrow at 8, flying to France. I wondered if it was too insensitive to ask about our divorce schedule at this moment. Sensing my concern, he made his first voluntary promise to me, once this contract is signed, I'll take a few days off for myself. It's fine, I'm not in a rush, I said, somewhat insincerely. He smiled, neither am I. After seeing Giles off, I sat alone on the sofa, lost in thought. I couldn't believe that after 7 years, Oberon still hadn't given up on me. Oberon Hardacre's relentless pursuit of me began in secondary school. At that time, I was merely a pawn in a bet between him and his friends. A month to win over Meredith Urquhart? Who do you think you're underestimating? Let's make a wager. In less than 3 days, I'll have her calling me darling. I cannot describe how I felt when I first heard those words. I stood trembling on the rooftop as Attilia Quilter held a voice recorder, sneering at me with contempt. In my eyes, you're just a prude with a rotten core. That's exactly how Oberon described you to me. She uttered these words with smug satisfaction before strutting away. I remained frozen in place, unable to calm myself for a long time. So, Oberon's recent displays of affection and pursuit were all fake. Although I had been wary and hadn't wavered, having it pointed out so blatantly made me feel as if my dignity had been trampled into the mud. To continue studying in peace, I had no choice but to apply for a transfer. However, before my transfer application was approved, Oberon left school first. Not long after, Attilia also left. Some classmates said her family's business had gone bankrupt, and they couldn't afford the tuition fees. Although Oberon had left school, his obsession with me didn't end. But not being in the same school meant fewer chances to meet. I endured it. Later, I changed all my contact information. It wasn't until I returned to work that I reconnected with Rowena Cargill. The next day, Rowena came to apologize. I asked her what she'd like for lunch, offering to cook for her. "Meredith, why are you so kind?" Her eyes welled up as she hugged me tightly. "You must be happy, Meredith." I felt tears falling on my shoulder. They were warm, and though I felt a bit uncomfortable, I didn't push her away. In the evening, Rowena went home. I walked her out to hail a taxi. On my way back, I ran into Oberon. Cigarette butts were scattered at his feet. He must have been standing there for quite some time. I hesitated, pausing in my steps. He stubbed out his cigarette and strode towards me. Instinctively, I wanted to turn and flee, but he called out my name. "Do you really dislike me that much?" I stopped, slowly turning to face him. 7 years had passed, and he had indeed matured. His already handsome features seemed even more refined and chiseled. But the embarrassment and pain he had caused me hadn't diminished with the passage of time. "It's been 10 years, Meredith. I've loved you for a whole decade." His gaze suddenly turned fierce. I lowered my head, not wanting to speak. 3 years ago, he had returned to England once. At that time, I had avoided seeing him. After he went home, I don't know what he said. Soon after, his mother sought me out. She offered me a check for £200,000 to date her son. Seeing my refusal, Mrs. Hardacre became furious. She directly threatened that she could prevent me from graduating. Not long after, the company where I was interning suddenly reported to the university that my conduct was improper. Online, supposed insiders leaked information claiming I had been kept by a wealthy businessman since high school. They even said I was ungrateful, suing the uncle who had raised me since childhood for a bit of money. That period was the darkest time of my life. In moments of emotional breakdown, I even contemplated suicide. It was then that Giles Farnaby appeared. He took me to meet the school administrators, allowing me to explain everything clearly. Then we went to see Aubryn Hardacre's mother, Mrs. Winifred Hardacre, secretly recording a video of her threatening me. The internship company also apologized to me voluntarily and clarified the misunderstanding to the school. He even helped me recover the compensation for my parents' old house demolition. When I was constantly harassed, slandered, and insulted by my uncle's family, he firmly held my hand and said, "No one dares to bully Giles Farnaby's wife." Under the witness of Giles's grandmother, we took wedding photos and exchanged rings. Everything was fake, yet everything felt so real it was frightening. Later, his grandmother passed away. Giles became busy with work, and I returned to school to handle graduation-related matters. Finally, with Rowena Cargill's company, I slowly emerged from the gloom, and Giles agreed to make time for the divorce. Aubryn Hardacre appeared again. He looked at me, unwilling to give up. "Just because of that one thing I said, you won't believe anything I do now, is that right?" You let go first," I said nervously. "Even prisoners can have their sentences reduced, but with you, Meredith Urquhart, I'm sentenced to death no matter what." "How is that fair?" Aubryn looked at me angrily, his voice revealing a suppressed rage that instantly made me panic. "Aubryn, let go of me," I warned in alarm. Aubryn grabbed my hand and pulled it towards his chest, asking with a gloomy expression, "Can't you truly feel my sincerity towards you?" "Let her go," a voice commanded. I was quite surprised to see Giles Farnaby approaching with a gloomy expression on his face. Hadn't he said he was flying to France today for a business meeting? Why on earth was he here? Giles grabbed my hand, rescuing me from Aubryn Hardacre's grip, and smoothly wrapped his arm around my waist. The man's warm breath brushed past my ear as he said, "Mr. Hardacre, having second thoughts about that £5 million, are we?" I was at a loss for words. Why did it always come back to that £5 million? As expected, Aubryn was provoked. He raised his voice, "Meredith is priceless to me." Giles chuckled and turned to me, "Would you divorce me for £100 million? In front of Aubryn, I had to say no, of course. I wouldn't. You see, I'm priceless to my wife as well. Aubryn's face turned red with anger, his gaze filled with resentment as he looked at me. "What do you see in this man who only talks about money?" he asked, utterly perplexed. "He's handsome, I suppose," I said. Aubryn fell silent. Although he had once proclaimed himself the campus heartthrob, his looks truly paled in comparison to Giles'. Giles' handsomeness transcended mere appearance, it was a kind of attractiveness that radiated from within. The first time I saw him, I could barely look him in the eye, afraid I might fall for him at first glance. Even now, every time we're alone together, my heart still races uncontrollably. "I never thought you were such a shallow woman." He didn't say it out loud, but I could read it in his eyes. "It's getting late. My wife and I need to head home for some quality time together, so we won't be inviting you up," Giles said. Before he could finish, Aubryn's face had already turned ashen. Then, Giles led me towards the stairwell. As we entered the lift, I forcefully broke free from his embrace. "Weren't you supposed to fly to France today?" I tried to find something to say to hide my embarrassment. Giles Farnaby nodded, the deal was snatched away. "What?" "The Hardacres took it," Giles said with intensity. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard even if I wanted to. Was the loss significant? To be honest, I felt quite guilty, never imagining that the wealthy Hardacre family would trouble a small business owner. Quite substantial. Giles furrowed his brow, thinking for a moment. Conservatively estimating, perhaps a few £100 million. My guilt instantly vanished. He was exaggerating again. The lift arrived, and Giles stepped out first. I hesitated for a moment before following him. Out of politeness, I invited him into my flat. Giles made himself at home on the sofa in the living room. I asked somewhat awkwardly, "Would you like to watch telly?" "I'd rather watch you," he said, cradling the back of his head with both hands, half reclining on the sofa, his gaze fixed intently on me. My face instantly flushed. I stood uncomfortably in front of the sofa and tentatively suggested, "It's getting late, perhaps." "Meredith," Giles interrupted directly, "have you considered what you'll do if Aubryn Hardacre comes pestering you once we're divorced?" "I'll handle it," I said, after a brief moment of shock, giving Giles a determined look. Seeing my resolute expression, Giles let out a long sigh. "Haven't you considered another possibility?" His voice carried a hint of resignation with an undercurrent of affection. "What possibility?" I stammered, not quite understanding Giles's meaning. "The possibility of not divorcing." Giles said, sighing again. Why not?" I asked. "In the adult world, there aren't always clear reasons for everything." Giles averted his gaze momentarily. Then stood up and said, "Marriage is sacred, we shouldn't treat it so carelessly." The topic had shifted so abruptly. "So we really need to think this through carefully." I stood up, picked up the cups from the coffee table, and walked into the kitchen to wash them. Giles followed me. I kept cursing myself inwardly for being so foolish. I should have realized it when he first delayed the divorce. This man beside me had no real intention of divorcing. Otherwise, how could he be so busy all the time? After washing the cups, I wiped down the counter again. Giles watched quietly from the side. When I had silently finished all this, he snatched the cloth from my hand and asked, "Are you that eager to divorce me?" "We agreed originally." He interrupted, asking, "Do you have someone you fancy?" "No." "Then why don't we try dating?" "What?" I was shocked. Giles sighed, "Since you don't have anyone you fancy, why not try to like me?" Why would I do that?" "We're husband and wife." Giles looked at me, his eyes serious as he said, "Shouldn't we like each other?" It sounded logical, but something felt off. "Just 1 month. If you still insist on divorcing after that, I'll have Zadok put the divorce on the schedule." After Giles left, I lay in bed. I couldn't sleep all night, tossing and turning, wondering what Giles meant by saying we liked each other. Did he mean that he liked me? But who would like someone and not contact them for 3 years? Besides, if I hadn't initiated contact about the divorce this time, he probably would have been too busy to even remember who I was. The next day, I went to work with huge dark circles under my eyes. My colleague Eloan saw me and said mysteriously, "Meredith, I saw the legendary Big Boss today. He's super handsome." Her face was flushed with excitement. How handsome could he be to get a young girl so worked up? Suddenly, Giles's stunningly handsome face flashed in my mind. I smiled and shook my head, thinking no one could be more handsome than Giles. "Meredith, could you come here for a moment?" Rowena's appearance interrupted this conversation. As soon as I entered the office, I was stunned. Why are you here?" I regretted asking as soon as the words left my mouth. Because I thought of what Eloan had said, and instantly realized that the company's big boss was likely Giles. Giles smiled and extended his hand towards me. "Meredith, I'm pleased you can get to know me again." I didn't feel particularly pleased. In the staff canteen, Giles and I sat facing each other. 3 years ago, I thought this company had potential, so I invested in it, Giles explained casually. My expression remained calm, but my inner thoughts were complicated. 3 years ago, shortly after I joined the company, HR suddenly called me in for a meeting. The gist was that the company couldn't sustain itself and needed to lay people off. The next day, when I came to sign the compensation agreement, HR suddenly said there would be no layoffs. They said a big boss had invested £5 million in the company, and they thought the company could struggle on for a while longer. This struggle lasted for 3 years. Now this big boss had suddenly become my husband in name. Who would believe it if I told them? "Don't you have any questions?" Giles asked, his expression composed and his smile calm. "Was it because of me?" I asked hesitantly. "Yes." He actually admitted it just like that. Why? I gasped in disbelief. Because at that time, you were sensitive, depressed, and self-loathing. I didn't want to see you retreat back into your shell over a job. Giles's voice was powerful, his eyes filled with emotions I dared not look directly at. My heart raced, and my fingers trembled involuntarily. It felt as if time had returned to 3 years ago. During that darkest period, Giles was actually the only light that kept me going. But that light had left later. I took a deep breath and said, Giles, I don't need you anymore now. I know. Giles fell silent. After a long while, he said, almost choking up, my girl has finally grown up. I glanced at him in surprise. He casually turned his head away. Since Giles Farnaby had revealed himself as the big boss at the company, they had prepared an office for him. Although he didn't come to work often, he would occasionally visit to inspect operations. Each time he came, he would call me into his office to cultivate our relationship. His lack of discretion naturally led to rumors flying around. People said I was his secret lover. I finally protested, can't you be more discreet? How can I be discreet when I'm pursuing my wife? Giles frowned, clearly disagreeing. Was his idea of pursuing his wife simply calling me into his office to report on work? There's gossip all over the company, I complained quietly. If this continued, I wouldn't be able to show my face at work anymore. You can just tell them we're married, Giles said. I glared at him in frustration. If you're too shy, I can tell them for you. Don't. I quickly stopped him. Giles looked at me silently for a few seconds, then asked, do you really dislike me that much? I shook my head, not understanding why he would ask such a question. If you don't dislike me, why not try to take our relationship further? He walked over and sighed. I instinctively took a step back. Looking up at Giles' breathtakingly handsome face, I hesitated for a moment before asking, but do you like me? I do like you, Giles said firmly. What do you like about me? Although I had vaguely sensed his feelings for me were unusual lately. Everything. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his dark eyes fixed on my face. I felt like I could hardly breathe. Until his hand slid down to my waist, pulling me tightly into his embrace. My ear was pressed firmly against his chest, hearing his heart beating as fiercely as erupting lava. He wasn't lying to me. Because a heart beating with love cannot lie. As I left Mr. Farnaby's office, my colleagues looked at me with varying expressions. I sat down at my desk, trying to appear composed, but my legs felt weak. Eloan leaned in, eager for gossip. Meredith, there's a handsome chap waiting for you at reception. A handsome man? I felt a sudden panic, immediately thinking of Aubryn Hardacre. I hesitated, unsure whether to go and see him. But Giles Farnaby stepped out first, and I hurried after him. When we reached reception, I breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't Aubryn, but Wilfred. Giles, what are you doing here? Wilfred looked at Mr. Farnaby in surprise. Mr. Farnaby gave him a cold look, causing Wilfred to shrink back, not daring to speak further. I glanced curiously between them, suppressing my confusion to ask, Wilfred, is everything all right? Wilfred was the son of my former teacher, Mrs. Yardley, and 3 years younger than me. When I was 9, my parents died in an accident, and my uncle and aunt became my legal guardians. My aunt then contacted a local sweatshop, intending to make me work to supplement the family income. It was Mrs. Yardley who found me. She took me to my uncle's house and rescued me from that suffocating environment. She helped me re-enroll in school and organized a fundraiser among the staff and students to solve my living and eating problems. Sometimes I wonder, if Mrs. Yardley hadn't found me then, would Meredith Urquhart now be hiding in some dark corner, waiting to slowly rot away? Over the years, I've lost touch with many people, but Mrs. Yardley always calls to invite me for dinner during holidays. Gradually, Wilfred and I became friends as well. However, I never imagined he would know Giles Farnaby too. Mom wants you to come for dinner on Saturday, Wilfred said. All right, I'll be there, I agreed readily. I walked him to the lift, where he waved goodbye to me and then to Mr. Farnaby, see you, Giles. After Wilfred left, I turned to Mr. Farnaby. Care to explain? Explain what? He looked surprised. You and Wilfred. His mother was my teacher. What an extraordinary coincidence to have shared the same teacher. Saturday arrived in the blink of an eye. I picked up a gift and headed to Mrs. Yardley's house. After dinner, I once again asked Mrs. Yardley about the information of my benefactor. This time, she still refused to say anything. She only mentioned that the person supporting me was very low-key and would sponsor hundreds or even thousands of children like me every year. She told me not to worry too much about it. Then she began to inquire about my life plans. For some reason, I thought of Giles Farnaby. Remembering he was once Mrs. Yardley's student, I wondered if she might have some childhood photos of him at home. Mrs. Yardley kept all the graduation photos of her former students in a large album in the bookcase in her study. I pulled the album out from the shelf and started flipping through it page by page. Suddenly, a graduation photo from 2004 caught my eye. In the back row, there was a handsome tall boy who looked very familiar. I took out the photo and found the name corresponding to his position. Giles Selwood. A name so distant I had almost forgotten it. After leaving Mrs. Yardley's house, it took me nearly 3 days to slowly accept the possibility that Giles Selwood could be Giles Farnaby. It also brought back memories of that summer in 2005. That year, Mr. Selwood passed away due to illness, leaving Giles without anyone to care for him. My father brought him home. I was thrilled, finally able to spend time with the older brother I admired. But at 13, Giles was gloomy, rebellious, and stubborn. My father repeatedly dragged him back from arcades, pool halls, internet cafes, and other entertainment venues. I heard him say in a nonchalant tone, "Why bother with me so much? Isn't it enough that I get top marks?" My father hit him for the first time. That night, I slept restlessly. In the middle of the night, I heard the door open. I snuck out and ran into Giles, his face bruised and swollen. "Don't be afraid," he said. I pursed my lips, looking at his injuries, and lowered my head in shame. I'm sorry. I apologized for my father's violence. Giles looked at me quietly, then smiled carelessly. "Silly girl, your dad doesn't have the ability to beat me up like this." I took the first aid kit to his room and helped him apply medicine. He vividly described how he got into a fight with a group of troublemakers at the internet cafe. I listened, heart pounding, and asked in confusion, "Why did you have to fight?" Giles paused for a moment, then patted my head and said, "I don't have a father anymore." I didn't understand what not having a father had to do with fighting. Until 2 years later, when I lost both my parents and became an orphan. Suddenly, I understood the bitterness behind Giles's words. Giles lived with my family for a year. Then his grandmother took him away, but he often came back to see me. Looking back now, that time was probably the last of my childhood happiness. Later, his mother in France finally completed the paperwork and took him to France. On the day he left, I didn't go to see him off. I hid under the covers and cried for a long time. My father said Giles was disappointed not to see me at the airport, but he still left a phone number for me. He told me to call this number whenever I missed him. I locked the paper with his phone number in my diary. I found the diary in my drawer. The handwriting on that piece of paper was still clearly visible. I dialed the number on my mobile. Meredith. The familiar voice came through, and I couldn't help but tremble. "I'm sorry," he said. I clenched my jaw and silently hung up the phone. 16 years ago. I had dialed this number repeatedly in front of all the police officers at the station. I told them I wasn't an orphan, that I still had a brother. But the call was never connected. My uncle's family became my legal guardians. They took all the compensation money and occupied my house. I went from being the owner to a pitiful dependent. When my cousin moved into my bedroom and my cousin's sister divided up my clothes, I also realized. My childhood ended that summer. Along with my memories of Giles, buried together. In the dead of night, I was startled awake by a knock at the door. Giles Farnaby stood outside. I fetched a pair of slippers from the shoe rack and poured him a glass of water. "Meredith," he called out, stopping me in my pretense of busyness. To be honest, since discovering that Giles was my childhood friend Giles Selwood, I felt rather awkward. I wasn't sure how to face him. In my younger years, when I was mistreated by my uncle's family, I had resented him. But as I grew older, I realized this resentment was unfounded. Back then, he was only 15. Even if he had known about my situation, he would have been powerless to help. Moreover, he knew nothing of it at all. I parted my lips, wanting to tell him I had long since forgiven him. But to my shock, he began to remove his trousers right in front of me. I quickly shut my eyes. "What are you doing?" I exclaimed. Surely he wasn't expecting to fulfill marital duties at a time like this? After removing his trousers, he started to take off his shirt. Though I covered my eyes with both hands, I couldn't resist peeking through a gap between my fingers. What I saw left me stunned. Giles's body and legs were covered in a network of twisted scars. I was so heartbroken I couldn't speak. Giles put his clothes back on and slowly walked towards me. I stood frozen in place. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his low voice close to my ear. In my second month in France, there was a car accident. Of the 5 of us there, I was the only survivor. For the next 3 years, I underwent 8 surgeries. Whenever I wanted to give up, I told myself that Meredith was waiting for me back home. My mom told me about what happened with your parents, but I couldn't bring myself to answer your calls. I was afraid of disappointing you. Meredith, I'm sorry. As he finished speaking, he buried his face in my hair. The faint sound of his choked breathing made my chest tighten with sorrow. All this time, in a place I couldn't see, he had endured just as much pain as I had. I slowly raised my arms and held him tight. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I love you," he said. After reconciling with Giles Farnaby, he confessed everything to me. Upon graduating from university, he started working at his stepfather's company. As his stepfather had no children of his own, he allowed Giles to take his surname. From the moment he joined the company, Giles displayed an astonishing talent for business. In just a few years, he increased the company's market value by several hundred times. Now, he is undeniably the wealthiest person in the world. When I heard the words "world's richest man," I couldn't help but feel his forehead. It was a bit warm. He probably had a fever. He insisted he wasn't ill and that he was in good health. But then he sneezed. When Giles catches a cold, he tends to linger, so I had no choice but to call his assistant, Zadok Sinclair. As a result, Zadok brought over some of his boss's spare clothes and personal items. He said that his boss was quite pitiful, having not enjoyed the warmth of a family for a long time. Now that he was ill, he needed love and care. With that, Zadok left, and I couldn't even return the items. Giles has been quite free lately. Every day after work, he would ask me out on a date. Under his financial charm offensive, I finally began to believe that he was truly wealthy. A month later, I moved into his home. 3 months into our cohabitation, while I was cleaning, I discovered a photo of me in my secondary school uniform. For some reason, it reminded me of that mysterious benefactor who had refused to reveal their name. I couldn't help but call Mrs. Yardley to ask, was the person who sponsored me Giles Selwood? "Yes, it was," she replied. "And when you came to the factory to find me back then, was that also because of Giles?" "He was unable to move about easily at the time, so he asked me to find you." This time, Mrs. Yardley finally didn't conceal anything. I sat on the sofa, unable to calm down for a long while. It turned out that in places I knew nothing about, he had been quietly doing so much for me. "Meredith," Giles approached from behind, snatching the duster from my hand with a look of reproach, "don't we have housekeepers?" I handed him the photo. He took it, glanced at it, and said, "Let's forget about the past." I remained silent. He put his arm around me and said, "Shall we move forward together?" "Yes," I replied. If the future always has him by my side, perhaps it's something to look forward to. 6 months after moving in together, Giles Farnaby said he wanted to have a proper wedding ceremony. I initially wanted to refuse, but he said only with a wedding could I truly become Mrs. Farnaby. We invited many people to the wedding. Aubryn Hardacre was also invited. But he didn't come. Instead, he sent me a very long text message. I didn't have the patience to read it all. As I was about to delete it, Giles snatched the phone and read every word. He told me he had been secretly taking business away from the Hardacre family. Aubryn had been sent by old Mr. Hardacre to expand their business in Africa. He wouldn't be bothering me anymore. Are you really the world's richest man? I couldn't help but ask curiously. The one and only, he replied. I don't want anyone else, I said, hugging his waist. I've chosen you for life, Giles Farnaby. And I, you, he responded. Under the azure night sky, his kiss enveloped me like the starry ocean. The family I had waited 16 years for had finally returned.